I'm Pearl Lam. I have galleries, I'm a collector, I'm a patron, I have a foundation. I do multidiscipline as like the artist. I think you must see that is when I first started in '93, I was doing pop-up shows. I wasn't even thinking about selling, because there's no market, basically. If we talk about a market, will be an expatriate market, foreigners living in China, foreigners living in Hong Kong. But I was doing it for the fact that I think it needs to be shown. Especially I started in Hong Kong. I'm from Hong Kong. So I often thought that Hong Kong was a cultural desert. So if I don't do something to show what it is, it will not, I mean, we always like to define what culture is anyway. And I was very lucky that I was actually, at the time I didn't think I was lucky, I was sent to China. I was in Shanghai because my parents wanted me to do property development and they think that doing art is completely frivolous. And there I met all the Chinese art world. I start integrating with them, I start looking at them, but having said that is, I could not speak Mandarin. So I could understand Mandarin, but I could not speak. So because my mother would speak Mandarin and Chinese to us and we would reply in Cantonese. So it was all the time about understanding, learning about Chinese art. But when I went there, I had a very colonial attitude because I was from Hong Kong and I was educated in England. And I thought that art in the Western world the contemporary art is so much higher than Chinese. Is until later on I realized, because I was hearing about the Chinese, that I realized everything happens in China. China has its own conceptual art 2,000 years ago. We have text art 2,000 years ago. I mean, we have all that sort of thing. So I started to be very interested in Chinese culture. But I'm interested in Chinese contemporary art that was rooted from our Chinese traditions, rather than at the time it was a lot of propaganda art, very politically propaganda art, which I consider, or many of us consider, as the Western perception of Chinese art, of Chinese contemporary art. So as time goes by, I still did not have a physical gallery, but I was just doing pop-up exhibition. Then I stopped in '98 until 2003, because there was a really big problem of Asia crisis. So my family was using that as an excuse to bring me back to the family business. But in 2003, I decided that that's it. So I started working with museums, sponsoring shows, taking shows to museums. Between 2003 to 2005, I was working with the National Art Gallery in Beijing, Shanghai Art and Art Museum, supporting the China Year in France or the French Year in China, bringing museums. And then I realized that, the biggest problem for me is I've seen different strands of Chinese art, but what the art world started changing was the end of 1990s. They had become an art market, but that market was a very Western perception of Chinese art. So most of the galleries, they're all selling to the West, and what they were selling is purely very much of a propaganda art. Very much what I consider as a Western perception. So I said, oh my God, I must have my own platform to start to show what I think is important, because there's so many different strands of art. It doesn't mean that Chinese artists taking a Western approach to art, a Western aesthetic, just feeding in with local content, that's Chinese art. So I was very determined to open a space, and at the time, I have to admit that I didn't even want to have a gallery. I didn't want to have this commercial basis. But later on, after I've done like a year with the museum, and then I realized that the most influential power in Asia is commercial market, auction houses. So since I wouldn't go into auction houses, so I said, oh my God, so I better build a commercial gallery. So I opened a design gallery first in 2005. And a fine art gallery in 2006. But I was trying to find a new structure as galleries, because galleries and museum, after all, is a Western based institution. So it was really difficult to really find a new way. So anyway, so I decided also in 2008 I launched my foundation. So that's what I do. I have a foundation called the China Art Foundation. You can Google it, www.thechinaartfoundation. So I can do what I believe it has to be done, because the foundation and the galleries actually has the same mission. We are doing cultural dialogues. The foundation is specifically about Chinese art, because I find out there's a lot of wrong perception of Chinese art. So the foundation is addressing that. We publish books, we have summit, that's what we do. And the galleries is doing cultural dialogue. So we are bringing international artists to China. Actually, we're talking about Brazilian artists, bringing it to China and bringing it to Asia. Showing them, but really contextualizing the work and bringing the Chinese artists to the international. I give you one example. When we did a China Jenny Horser show in Hong Kong, instead of having Jenny Horser just using English as a text, we encourage her to make a whole series based on Chinese text. So her famous series like Truism is all translated into Chinese. So we have bench in Chinese. We have the LED in Chinese. So it's really important because Jenny Horser's work is about her thoughts, her philosophy, and the way and her vision. So if it is in English, it's really difficult to have that relationship with the Asian audience. So that's what we do. And the same thing, we take a Chinese artist. Like one of the Chinese artists, we work with the American galleries like Blum and Paul. The other artists are Zhu Jingxu or Su Xiaobai. All their work is Chinese abstract, but the Chinese abstract is not based in Western abstract. It's all about Chinese ink-brush philosophy, and ink-brush culture. So all the work is based on Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. And so through the art, we talk about these cultural dialogues, this Eastern spirituality, this philosophy. M+ opening in 2019. So I'm betting on M+. So it will be really important for us, because in Hong Kong we have been ignoring our cultural development. So only in last 5 years, we started to have something more concrete. So Art Hong Kong opened in 2008. Hong Kong people always follow about fashion. In the era of the decade of 2000, fashion houses are using a lot of artists like Murakami, and all these makes Hong Kong people looking in contemporary art in a very different way, because Hong Kong people are very fashionable. They follow fashion brands. Through the fashion brands, then they realize that contemporary art is very cool and very hip. So that was the trend. I remember 2007, I have friends who would never talk about art, all of a sudden calling me up and said, "Oh, I want to go to Beijing. Can you help me to see artists?" I said, "You seeing artists was really, shocking for me." But that was the beginning. And 2008, Hong Kong, before Hong Kong Art Basel is the Art Hong Kong, they opened the art fair. So it consolidates the interest in art, in contemporary art, especially the importance. It validates the importance. So it's growing. But the last 3 years, because of the M+, because contemporary art now is so fashionable and so hot, and Hong Kong people would definitely follow the trend. So they became very serious contemporary collector. And in Hong Kong also is when they decided they want something, they go all the way. They're obsessive. I think you have to look at that, okay? If you look at the secondary market in China, it is high because there's a lot of speculative way. But in the whole world, there is 3 countries the art is especially high: USA, UK, and China. Art price also go high because 2 things that the prices are high: credentials and demands. Okay. Of course, Chinese, there's so many people So the huge population, just take the 0.1% buying contemporary. There's more demands than other places. So the demands. Second of all is Chinese art becomes more international, more mainstream. All those people all over the world are buying Chinese art. So Chinese art, of course, it goes up. Third, speculation. Most of the Chinese collectors, a lot of them are speculators. They see art as a commodity. So a lot of, especially the modern art, some of the artists is only seen in China, nowhere else, but prices goes up because these are the art that they understand. Realism, photorealism, and ink brush, traditional ink brush painting. I think contemporary art is growing very, very fast. Contemporary art is really important because it reflected our contemporary culture. On the 21st century, the world has changed. We become so globalized. So that culture, that globalized culture is making us want differences, to respect each of the culture, the differences of the culture. I think that is really going to be a very important point of what it is. If we see art as a political or social point of view, we can go on online to see it at any time. And of course, an artist would give a personal experience of everything. For me, I see art as more of a cultural point of view, rather than political and social, because political and social, I would always go online to look at the news or meet or one piece of work that the artist will talk about. I think what is happening is, since 2007, the Western domination of art, because I always say that, okay, we are against colonization, but we have Western culture colonizing the international art. Everything, we go to the big brother, the Western art, to say, hey, is this good? Is this bad? I think the barriers of that has lowered down since 2007. That the Western country, what I meant is Northern America and Western Europe, they are openly embracing subculture. That will be African, Middle Eastern, Brazilian, Indian, Indonesian. So we have a chance. And that chance is not for us to be the same like the Western art, but we have to strike out to see our differences. What makes us a Hong Kong artist? What makes us into a Chinese artist or Brazilian artist? I think that for me is really important for the next decade.